Hello, friends. Put on your reef safe sunscreen and pour yourself some rum. You're listening to Blame It on Buffett.
Well, I sailed from Lauderdale down to Key Largo, crossed the Gulf on a fast sloop, and I sailed the Abacos. As a kid, I read Kon-Tiki, and now all the pirate books too. There's just so many places on my list to see. I'm going crazy just trying to choose.
Welcome once again to Blame It on Buffett, a podcast that is all about anything inspired by the lifestyle that Jimmy Buffett leads. We like to call it escapism adjacent. There might be a website in the works by that same name. Escapism adjacent, not Blame It on Buffett. Look forward to that. Hopefully sometime in the future, not too far away. I'm trying to build it myself, I've never really built a website before, so it is taking a little while, but hopefully it will be available soon. And that's going to be just a place for all sorts of, really to aggregate the kind of escapism content that we are bringing you here on the podcast. And it's also sort of a team effort with my friend Dan Smith from Classic Buffett. Which he also has a podcast, so you'll be able to find both of our podcasts there, as well as different blog entries, maybe different other podcasts we like to listen to or shops that we like, that kind of thing. If you have any ideas for this sort of content that you might be interested in seeing on an escapism lifestyle website, please let me know, and I will do my best to work any suggestions into what we are doing. Like I said, I'm doing it myself, so it might not be the most professional ever, but hopefully down the line, I will be able to hire someone to make it look better. I just, don't have the money to spend on that right now. So I'm going to try and DIY it. Speaking of money, it took me a while to decide whether or not to do this, but I have implemented the support button in Anchor, which means that if you're really enjoying the podcast, you can go and donate money. It's kind of like Patreon. If you've ever done Patreon, where it's like a monthly donation, you can sign up and then it'll charge you monthly. And I understand that asking people for money, it's not the most comfortable thing for me. And it's totally not an obligation. If you listen to this podcast and you're just listening to the podcast and enjoying it, that's awesome. And that's all I need. But if you do feel like you want to add some support for things like buying a new microphone for different equipment, helping with the website, that kind of thing, you can hit that support button if you go to my Anchor homepage. I'll also post a link for the support button in the show notes for the show. And there's different amount options. The lowest one is 99 cents. So if you just want to donate 99 cents a month, you can totally do that. And every little bit helps. But once again, if you don't want to do that, I totally understand. And you are in no way obligated to do that. Just keep on listening to the podcast if you're enjoying it. And that is all that I ask, really. So okay, so before we get into the interview, which I have a really awesome interview this week with Shawn Martin, who makes rum for Papa's Pilar. He's also a marine scientist, so he does scuba. He's a boat captain. He likes Jimmy Buffett. Basically, he lives in Key West, so he's really living, my dream life, essentially. But yeah, so we'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to, before we do that, share one more story, because I'm going to be doing one of these song stories every episode. And this story comes from some friends of mine from my local Parrothead Club here in Tucson, Chuck and Rhonda Wilkie, who are my friends in the club. And when I asked for song story suggestions, they were some of the first ones to share. So I wanted to share their story. It's really awesome. And hopefully they don't mind. They posted it on the post that I made about sharing stories on the podcast. So I'm assuming that means they're okay with it. But Chuck wrote, in 2002, I got 4 tickets to see Jimmy Buffett at Tinley Park outside of Chicago. I told Rhonda to invite her sister and her husband. I had a ring in my pocket. I told her sister I was proposing during Come Monday. The song started, we were dancing, and her sister gathered a group to watch me take the knee and ask Rhonda to be my wife. We still get a little teary-eyed when we hear the song. Which I just love that story, proposing at a concert, like to a specific Jimmy Buffett song. And then, from then on, that Jimmy Buffett song is really special and means a lot because of that. So thank you so much, Chuck, for sharing that. And then my favorite part is that Rhonda responded. This was on Facebook. Rhonda responded it to add to the story. It was a very important part of the story to know, which is while this happened, Rhonda had a beer box on her head. Because they were at a Jimmy Buffett concert, so why not? Which is just like a perfect sum up of Chuck and Rhonda. They are so lovely and so much fun. So thank you, Wilkies, for sharing your story, and thank you for letting me share it with the listeners on the podcast. If you have your own Jimmy Buffett song stories, you can still send them to me. You can email them, blameItonBuffettPodcast@gmail.com, or you can message me on social media. It's at Blame Buffett Pod on most things. So you can do that there. And I would be happy to get more stories. And like I said, I'll just keep sharing maybe one per episode as long as I have stories to share. So hopefully you enjoyed that story as much as I did. I love the beer box. But it's like so romantic. Like, oh, I'm proposing. And then it's just like, oh, but also I had a beer box on my head. So I just think that's like classic parrot head love story, So yeah, thanks again to the Wilkies for sharing their story. It was one of my favorites for sure. Okay, and now on to the interview with Shawn Martin. I hope you learn a lot from this because I honestly learned so much. I think hearing about the rum making process is so cool, and learning about just environmental stuff. So please enjoy. All right, welcome to this week's interview for Blame It on Buffett. I am here with Shawn Martin, who I'm very excited to have on as a guest because he is so many awesome things. He's a marine scientist, and he makes rum, and he likes Jimmy Buffett. So I feel like that's basically the perfect rounded out guest to have on this podcast. Shawn, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited. It was funny. A lot of the guests that I've gotten for this podcast, I didn't really expect this when I started it, but are people that other people introduce me to. So like guests that I have will be like, oh, I know someone that might be good. And so when I had Ryan and Crystal, the Caribbean Castaways, on a couple weeks ago, they were like, hey, we know this guy Shawn, and like he would probably be a cool guest if you're interested. And I was like, yeah, totally. um, so shout out to those guys for making this hookup and getting you on here. I'm really excited to chat. So like I said, you do so many really awesome things that basically, I mean, obviously I don't know your life, but it sounds pretty great. Like if I could trade lives with you, I feel like I would do that in a heartbeat. How did you get started? Let's start with the science part. So you're a marine scientist. What kind of marine science do you do?
So my master's is in marine biology. I studied in grad school, I studied fisheries management, but being down here in the Keys, I'm based in Key West. So a lot of what I do now is a lot of water quality and branching into coral and things like that.
Cool. And did you were doing that originally and then you sort of got into the rum thing? Like those two things seem really different. How did you end up going from marine science and then getting involved in making rum?
Right. So it's kind of an interesting path. I got out of, I graduated grad school, and then my then fiance, now wife, and I, we wanted to come down here. We had a lot of friends down here. Well, I had a lot of friends down here, and she always wanted to move down here. And being that I just got out of grad school, that's the definition of a transitional phase.
Right.
And she, wasn't in a. She had left another place where she was working, so she was sort of in limbo as well. And I had actually found a job for her to come down here. I found it on Craigslist, I think, of all places. She's in the restaurant business, so she came down as an operations manager for Hard Rock Cafe. I initially came down here As I'm a boat captain as well as a scuba instructor. I just got my master's in marine biology. So I thought I was going to come down here and write my own way, and it turns out no. The jobs are far from and few between in my field, and people tend to sit in them until they die. So
Right.
I was, I've always been, a rum nerd. Not always, but for the last 7 or 8 years before that, was kind of a rum nerd and learning more and more about rum. And I was quickly going broke as a dive instructor down in Key West. That wasn't. They say if you want to, if you want to make $1 million in the dive industry, start with two. Uh, so that wasn't working out. And a friend of mine, Carlton Grooms, was building the distillery down here for Papa's Pilar, and he needed a distillery manager, sort of like an assistant rum maker, and offered me the positions. He knew I had the science background, and he knew I knew rum, though I had never distilled rum before. So I picked him up on the job, and that was one of the better decisions I made in my life. It's really made all the difference for me down here. And he, short time later, just stepped away from the company. So the rum maker position for Key West kind of fell to me. So that's the short story of how I got here.
Well, I mean, it seems like it worked out pretty well. You're just like, have a friend that's like, hey, you want to come make rum? That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, for the time he was there, it was amazing. So I got to, Carl's one of my best friends in the world, and so I got to make rum with him, and live in Key West, and still do all the fun things, on the water and all that. So it was definitely a cool experience, and continues to be. Now I'm just the lead on that for Key West anyway. We have a master distiller, master rum maker for the national brand as a whole, based out of Lakeland, Ron Call. But down here, I'm sort of the head of what they call sort of the innovation center, coming up with or trying to come up with new expressions and things like that. So.
Cool. So there's the distillery in Key West, and it's a national brand. Are there other distilleries, like multiple branches in other places, or is it just kind of like the national headquarters and then you guys in Key West?
No, there's the national headquarters. That's on the east coast of Florida, around the Palm Beach area, and then our actual main facility, where all the blending and barreling and everything is done, in Lakeland, Florida. Down here, we actually have the distillery itself. So we actually have a still and a fermentation tank, where we actually do fermentations, distillations, and create our own rum.
Because so Papa's Pilar, for anyone that hasn't heard of it, is the brand of rum, and it's Papa obviously is Hemingway, and then Pilar was the name of his boat, right? So it's named after his boat, essentially.
Yeah, and it's really cool. I mean, even before this, I was a huge, as I'm an aspiring novelist myself. So, and Hemingway has always been a major influence of mine, and I've read everything that he's done multiple times. And so, getting to learn more and more, and actually work with the family. Like, I've sat down with Patrick Hemingway, who's the son, and John Hemingway, the grandson, and great grandchildren, and all sorts of people, the Hemingway family. So that's been really neat. But yeah, the Papa is the nickname that he gave himself when he was living in Paris in the 20s. It was a term of endearment he heard when he was in Spain. Papa, Papa, so he requested everybody call him
I
Papa.
I didn't know that. I mean, like, I knew that was his nickname, obviously, but I didn't know that he had given himself. That's pretty bold to just be like, hey, everyone, just call me this now.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ernest was, if nothing, he was a bold man. So, and then
Yeah,
as you mentioned, Pilar was the name of his boat, which he named after his one of his wives. I think it was his third wife, Pauline, was his nickname for her. So then he named his boat after her.
that's really cool. So did the Hemingway family um like decide they wanted to start this, or did somebody else say like we want to start this distillery and like we need to get permission from we need to get the Hemingway family involved so that we can do this?
Right. So, as I understand it, I'll preface with that. Uh, our company had a spirit before, Angel's Envy. It's a bourbon, and they had just built that, brought it up, sold it, and we're looking to do something else. And the Hemingway family, I guess, was looking to get involved in something like the spirits industry, and and there's a connection somehow, and I don't know what it is, with some of our executives, and they basically said, "Hey, if you're interested in uh, doing something in Key West, we're on board." And so that's sort of how the whole thing was born.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
it was a mutual thing that just happened. The paths just happened to cross.
yeah, I didn't want to read like too much about all the history and stuff ahead of time because I think it's more fun to like learn from people that are on the show. But I did read on the website um, that the Hemingway family, the money that they make from it, they donate most of that to charity, which I didn't know before. And like, I think that's really nice. I love to have um, guests that are, if they have like companies or brands or things that they sell, I'm a big fan of ones that donate a portion of their proceeds to charity, especially if it's like for ocean conservation or something that's like close to my heart. So I was really happy to find that out about the Hemingway family, like their portion of proceeds, they donate a majority of it to charity. So that's really cool.
Yeah, they do, for charities to do with literacy and also for ocean conservation. Because Papa was he was a conservationist of sorts, I guess we'll say. But he used to take, and I forget which university it was. I want to say it was Pennsylvania or some college in the Northeast. Uh, he would actually take students out on his boat to do research, and then, as I understand it, beyond even that, he would send samples back of some of his catches to them for analysis. So he
Oh,
was into science and into conservation as well. So
that's really interesting. I feel like I'm gonna need to like read more, like because obviously, like I know who Hemingway is, and I know like all the main things about him that are like public. The sort of he's like obviously a famous person in history, so like I knew all that, and I've read some of his work, especially like in school and stuff. But after like finding all this other stuff about him, I feel like I want to dig deeper and like read more like a full biography or something because I've never um like read a full history of his life. I One of my favorite places in Key West is the Hemingway house,
hmm
because I love the history and also I love the cats. So it's like a double win. I get to pet the cats, but also like going on the tour there the first time I went, I was just like, whoa, this is like so much cool stuff about just like his house and his life that I didn't know. So I feel like maybe like I didn't know that about him, like taking students out on his boat or contributing to that kind of thing. So I feel like now I need to like buy some books and read up on him more because this is all super interesting.
yeah, there's a lot you can learn about him, and I've learned quite a bit working there, and communicating with the family, as far as him being like an ambulance driver during World War I, and him convalescing after he was injured, during a mortar attack, is what led to the Farewell to Arms book. And he was a world correspondent during World War II. So he's definitely he's we call him the real most interesting man in the world.
Right, yeah. I mean, he clearly is like kind of what that guy is based on, right? Like he kind of has the same beard and stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
um, so when you make the rum, I know that so Papa's Pilar kind of has multiple things, right? You have your own, like you said, like you distill the actual rum, but then you also do like blending and stuff where you take different rums from like the Caribbean and then blend them with. So is that kind of like two separate parts to it? Is like the blending, but then also like actually distilling your own rum.
right. So how the company started was initially, and we still don't have a still up in Lakeland. The only still where we do any fermenting and actual rum creation is down here in Key West. So they would source rums from around the Caribbean, and the Caribbean basin, and then they're specifically chosen for their profiles, and then they'd be blended together and put through a barreling system that would go through. So for our dark, we'll go through bourbon, ruby port barrels, and then Oloroso sherry cask, whereas the blonde would go through the bourbon and then finish in the sherry cask. And just blending those together in that process really helps to bring them all together nicely and impart some added layers with the wood. So down here in Key West, we actually do distillation, whereas in Lakeland it's a blending and barreling process. Now I have sent there is plans to and I don't want to misspeak if anybody from my company's listening to this, because on the
I'm sure
national,
they're not.
you'd be surprised. We got a fun group of people, but actually, you're out in California, right, or
I'm in Arizona, so
Arizona? Okay, well,
yeah.
we've got some people out west, so.
Oh, cool. Well, if they need rum helpers, I'm available. I don't know how to make rum, but I could learn.
It's easy. It's just sugar and water and yeast. Really, that's what it comes down to. But
Yeah,
so
my
yeah,
husband's actually a brewer. He works at a brewery, a craft brewery. So I have made like home brew before beer. So I feel like it's like the fermentation process is like kind of, general for things.
yeah, it's the first step. Actually, with beer, they've got to do a lot more sterilization and cleaning than I do. But yes, I mean, essentially, some people actually call my fermentation, once it's done, I call it a wash. Some people call it a beer. And there's type of stills called a beer still, which is used as a stripping still. And so it's very, very similar. It's just because all alcohol comes from sugar. It's just yeast eating sugar. And the flavor profiles change based on amino acids and different things like that, which comes from whatever medium you're using, whether it's grain or sugar cane or whatever. So, uh, but yeah, it's a super interesting process. But once you're done with the fermentation, then it's just heating it up like you would, on a stove. So it's not really overly complicated. It can get very complicated. That's a very general, broad stroke of how it's done. But
Yeah. Well, if you wouldn't mind, I don't know if anybody else cares about this, but if you wouldn't mind, like, kind of a more detailed description of how to do it, like, kind of the different steps, I would be really interested to know.
yeah, so first of all, I want to say that with rum, there's this misnomer, and this not a misnomer, but a misconception. And I always like to clear this one up off the bat, that people think because rum comes from sugar cane and has sugar in it. What I like to remind people is, yes, it comes from sugar cane. That's where we get our sugar. But vodka comes from sugar.
Right.
Whiskey comes from sugar. All alcohol, even beer, comes from sugar. But at the end of the fermentation process, all the sugar is used up. When it comes off the still, every spirit is water, essentially water and ethanol. There's obviously some different esters and amino acids and stuff in there, but it's primarily water and alcohol. So if there's any sugar in it, it's because somebody's added it to it. So.
Because the sugar is mostly for the yeast to like eat, right? To do its thing.
Right. Yeah. The yeast will consume the sugar, and it's a metabolic process, and then it produces carbon dioxide, heat, and ethanol, as well as what's called fusel alcohols and congeners and things like that. But primarily, those are the three things that it creates. So you asked for a description. Like a real quick description is we do a 20% molasses mixture. The rest is water. Otherwise, it's too viscous. The wash is too thick, and the yeast can't do its job. Essentially, it's called the osmotic pressure, to be specific
Yeah.
about it, is too great. So after that does its job over a course of 4 days, we have about a 10% wash or beer. And then we have to do what's called a stripping run. So we take the wash out of the fermentation tank, put it in the still, and we heat it up. Now, ethanol evaporates at 173.1 degrees Fahrenheit versus water at 212. So with the stripping run, we'll just heat it up fast, and we'll pull all the alcohol out of it. It rises up through the still, and then it's hard to describe it without having a visual. But
Sorry.
it goes up
It's
through
okay. You're doing great.
it goes up through the still. The top of the still has what's called a swan neck on it, and then down through the line arm, or the lin arm. This is just the pipe that goes to the condensing column, and the condensing column is just a device that cools the vapors back into a liquid, and then you collect it to a container. So the stripping run just pulls all the alcohol out of it. And we just run that until it says 0. Then that produces what we call a low wine, which is just a really unrefined rum, usually about 80 proof. And then we'll take that low wine, put it back into the still after we clean the still and everything, of course. Some people have multiple stills just for doing this. But we put it back into our still, and then you heat it up slowly. So you have alcohol. There's different types of alcohol. It's not just one molecule. So as you bring the temperature up, you have what we call heads, hearts, and tails. So the heads are more volatile, so they evaporate a little bit quicker. They evaporate at a lower temperature. So as you bring the temperature up, the stripping run, like I said, is hot and fast. The refining run or spirits run, we bring the temperature up slowly. And as that comes up slowly, those more volatile chemicals start to evaporate and come off first. And those actually we get rid of. Those are the methanols and aldehydes and things like that. So you remember that you've heard the moonshiner adage, drink too much moonshine, you go blind.
Right, yeah.
So methanol can cause permanent blindness and death. So that's where that came from. So that all that comes off, and then you get into what's called the hearts. And the hearts is the ethanol. It's what we're looking for. That's the rum. And then after the rum, and that's evaporating at the 173.1. And then once the alcohol, the ethanol, the rum that we're looking for is finished, then you get into the fusel alcohols, which are heavier elements that have a higher boiling point, still lower than water, but heavier than alcohol. And then those are the tails where you get a lot of flavor and stuff from. But if you have too much of that in your rum, it makes sort of an impure rum. So that's where the art really comes in, because separating those out are called making cuts. And so that's where my fun part comes in, because unlike other distilleries that that have the big fancy computers and things that tell the people when to make the cuts or just do it for them, we actually Bahama Bob Leonard and I, who's my other rum maker, we sit and smell and taste, and that's how we determine when to make the cuts. So
Wow. So it's like really personal, like you're like really making those decisions as opposed to just like a computer.
Yeah. We sit there. I mean, when it's coming off the still, mind you, at the top of the top part of the hearts, we're still in 170 proof range, and even at the lower end of it, we're at 160s. So pretty, what we call hot, meaning high alcohol. I think most people, if they put 170 proof rum in their mouth, they wouldn't taste anything for the rest of the week. But
Probably don't want that.
yeah, so we add some water to it to bring the proof down. But yeah, that's exactly it. We sit and we taste, and then we're like, all right, let's make our cut here.
Wow, that's really cool. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that was how the sort of like end process worked for making it exactly the rum that you are producing. What's the difference between light rum and dark rum? Is it like a filtering process, or is it actually like a different fermentation process?
Well, simple answer is light rum and dark rum is just so. A spirit's color typically comes from the barrel, and typically the longer in a barrel, the darker the spirit. Now, of course, the wood type is going to influence that. You've got some woods that you can put it in for 20 years, and it'll have a nice red color to it, let's say, but it won't be super dark. But like a light rum, and by that I think you mean like a white rum.
Right. Yeah. Sorry.
So that's either a rum that's never seen a barrel, which a lot of times if they're going to put that in a bottle, it's coming most of the time, not always, but most of the time it's going to come off of a column still, which is like what Spanish rum makers like Bacardi and them use. And it's just, and there's no way for me to really describe that without a visual, but it essentially is a really, really tall still. Some of them can be 30, 40, 50 feet tall. Whereas they have these different plates all up and down that where redistillation happens at each level. So each time you redistill something, you get a chance to pull the compounds that cause flavors away from it. So if you pull from the top of the column still, you can have what's called a cane neutral spirit, just essentially a vodka. And then the further down you get a heavier body to it. So you could have a white rum that way, but some manufacturers also will barrel their rum and then strip the color out using filtration. And what that does, it still helps to, the barrels will help to round out some of those rougher edges of the rum, but then they strip it back to clear, which also takes a lot of the flavor out of it. But that's done for specific reasons and profiles that they're looking for.
Right, because in addition to being different colors, like white rum is kind of a different flavor. Like you would maybe use that in different sorts of cocktails sometimes than like a regular darker rum.
Right. I mean, with the white rum, there's variations in those. I've got quite the rum collection at my house, and I've got several white rums, and I could put them in front of you, and they're all three very distinct.
Right.
Some of them have a little heavier body. Maybe those are like a pot still rum because you get a more body out of a pot still versus a column still. And then the column still rums, I can tell right off the bat, we do blind tastings here a lot just to refine our professional development, refine our palates.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, the best kind of professional development.
right. And so, but you can also have like out of Jamaica, you can get some white rums that have these, we call them funky rums, or have it's a high ester profile to them. And so they've got this beautiful sort of like funk to them. That comes a lot from their fermentation as well, and how they do that. But their double retort pot still system, can have a white rum that has a lot of really neat flavors in it.
Oh, that I would definitely like to try that. I'm into funky beer, so I feel like I would be into funky rum for sure.
Yeah, check out Rumfire, Ray and Nephew, or anything from Hamden Estate. Which actually Rumfire comes from Hamden Estate, but they all have that traditional funk to them. So
Cool.
Jamaican funk, yeah.
Jamaican, the traditional Jamaican funk.
Yeah.
Do you, so I assume, I mean, you said like you don't have the fancy computer to do all the stuff, but I assume you have a pretty modern setup. I know there's like some rum producers in the Caribbean that are still sort of doing it the traditional old school way, and I've read some about that. Do you sort of do any part of your process like the more traditional old way, or do you all have like a pretty modern setup for everything?
The only thing really that is remotely modern on our still is, we have what's called a rectifying column, which is sort of it functions slightly differently than than actual column still, but it's essentially a column still on top of our pot still. And so it's a hybrid. So that's a more modern technique. But outside of that, we don't have the only computerized anything we have on our still, and it's just so I don't have to climb up and down ladders, is we have digital thermometers that Bluetooth to an iPad, so I can tell what the temperature is at the top of the column, and I can tell what the temperature is in the pot and what's called a head temperature. So otherwise, I've got to climb up and down, a ladder, which we used to do, but these were just way, way more convenient. But no,
Yeah,
outside that, we do it very, very old school style. Outside of those two caveats.
that's really cool. Do you do like if I ever came to Key West, like could I get a tour of the distillery, or do you guys not do that?
No, absolutely. Our distillery is set up to be a tourist attraction. Everything, we have walls and all these different safety measures. So specifically, people can do tours physically while Bob and I are actually distilling rum.
Oh,
So
great. So
100%.
anyone listening, if they go to Key West, could look that up and come check it out.
Yeah, Hemingway Rum Company, 201 Simonton Street. Right now, maybe
Right.
not
Yeah.
the best. We're not doing tours. Our gift shop's open because we have a lot of great merchandise and stuff, but you can find all that on our website. Right now, unfortunately, though, we can't do tours. It's just not a good time.
Yeah, obviously. But hopefully someday when things are a little more back to normal, then people can come and check that out. I will definitely be doing that next time I'm in town, whenever that will be. I was supposed to be there for in November, but obviously that's not happening anymore. So, but hopefully next year. So I will be
Oh,
excited to
from
come see it.
meeting of the minds.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, since it's canceled, I like some people are still going to Key West. Like I know some of the musicians and fans are still going, but yeah, I just didn't think it was a great idea
Yeah.
for me. So.
It's not, and there's so much stuff that's closed down right now. I mean, maybe by November it'll change, but it's not looking good. It's so
Yeah,
I'd
I guess
save my
you never
money on some
know,
of
but
these
it's kind
things.
of like a play it by ear, last minute sort of situation, and I had to make a call about my plane ticket. So
Yeah,
because I'd already bought a plane ticket and everything, so I had to decide like should I cancel it now or so.
yeah,
But
that's
next year for Meeting the Minds, I will definitely be there. So
awesome. Yeah, we always do stuff like that. A good friend of mine, John Cunningham's an author, and he's always down doing different things for his books and stuff during Media in Minds. He actually had Nadir Shakur stay at his house last year, which is
whoa,
interesting.
that's cool. Yeah, I've actually heard of him. I haven't read any of his stuff though. I should check it out.
Definitely should.
I think I follow him on Instagram. Um, so I bought a bottle of rum in preparation for this interview. I was like, well, I don't really do a lot of research on my guests always, but like, I was like, I need to do research on this rum clearly so that I could talk about it. Um, but I wasn't paying attention and I bought the Marquesa one, which is like whiskey barrel aged, and I don't really like whiskey. So,
Have you tried it yet?
yes, I tried it and it definitely is, not as, I guess, whiskey-y as I expected, but it still has kind of like that whiskey edge. We drink barrel-aged beer a lot, but usually more like bourbon barrels,
Hmm.
and whiskey is like a little bit different flavor. I would say like it's not my favorite ever, but that's just like a personal thing because I'm like not a fan of whiskey. But I was wondering if you had any suggestions of like cocktails that the whiskey barrel aged rum would be especially good in because I'll probably end up using it to make cocktails instead of like a sipping rum. Like I think if it didn't have the whiskey edge, then I would probably just use it as like a sipping rum. But because of the whiskey edge, I think I probably would end up using it in a cocktail. So do you have any cocktail suggestions for that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, anybody that's looking for cocktails for our spirits, you can papaspilar.com. We've got a ton of them on there that bartenders from around the country, around the world have came up with. But for that one specifically, yeah, that one sort of describe what, for people that aren't familiar with the brand. What I described earlier for the dark rum being the blend of 9 different rums that goes to the bourbon, the port, and the sherry barrels. The Marquesa blend, which is the Marquesas are a set of islands out off of Key West here, about 20 miles west of here. Um, the Marquesa blend is we take the dark rum out of that barreling system, and we actually those barrels we'll use several times, until they stop working for us. But we actually purchased straight Kentucky whiskey barrels
Oh,
from Kentucky, obviously, and and then took the rum out and put it into those barrels to finish. Now, there's no whiskey in the barrels. The barrels
right.
are empty. So
But
it's
it
interesting.
still takes on the flavor, because the whiskey has been in
Yeah,
the barrel. The barrel takes on the flavor of the whiskey, and then I mean that's the whole point of like barrel aging in different uh alcohol type barrels is because like it takes, and I just want to say like this is in no way a reflection on the actual rum. Like if you like whiskey, I think this would probably be like your favorite rum ever because like I still like it and I don't even really like whiskey.
yeah,
It's just like for straight sipping, like just the rum, it's probably not the one for me. I think I'm just gonna order like the regular dark rum for that. I just made a mistake when I was placing my
uh,
my Instacart order. I just like wasn't paying attention.
yeah. Well,
But I would recommend this one a lot, especially for people that do really like whiskey because it is a really delicious rum, but also it has a little bit of a whiskey like edge to it.
yeah. Well, so yeah, I would definitely suggest that you grab the dark, but I would also wonder if because I don't really get any whiskey out of it, but I wonder how much of it's like because you saw the whiskey like a
Mental.
sort of a psychosomatic sort of thing.
I don't
Um,
think I looked at it before I drank it. I was like, "Oh, I'm drinking this rum," and then I was like, "Oh, I don't this." So it's I had like like when you drink too much of a certain alcohol, like when you're younger, and
yeah,
it like goes badly, and then it kind of like taints that alcohol for you. That's kind of like what happened to me. Um, so I had kind of a bad experience with drinking a lot of Maker's Mark. And I think that was the one, and it doesn't really matter, but yeah, so
yeah,
I think I'm just, like, extra sensitive to it, because of that,
I got you.
but I think, like, if I put it in, like, a cocktail, like, some kind of rum cocktail, then, that has a few other flavors, I think, like you said, it's really not, like, a strong whiskey flavor, it's just that I'm, like, super sensitive to any whiskey flavor,
Right.
um,
Well, it's like Bob always says, everybody there's a rum for everybody, and
yeah,
that one's not yours. That's perfectly fine. So with that one for cocktails, I think that one goes really well in an old fashioned.
okay,
I think is a really good one for that cocktail specifically because of the complexity to it.
yeah,
But if you're more not such a because that's a more liquor forward kind of heavy cocktail. Now that's what I like. I don't like a lot of blenders and mixers and sugars and stuff. But our dark rum, including that specific expression, goes. If you get a Barrett's ginger beer
Mm.
and some Agnosura bitters, just a couple dashes of bitters on the rocks. Put the rum on top of that and top it off with the Barrett's. It works really well. You just can't use for our rums. You can't use for whatever reason the Goslings doesn't go super well with it. I think because
Okay.
of the sweeter profile of the Gosling's ginger beer, which is perfectly fine ginger beer. It just doesn't communicate with our rum as well. So
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's really good to know. I do have it's not like a ginger beer, but it's like, I think it's like from Trader Joe's. It's like they're like bottled sort of ginger ale or whatever, but it's like super gingery and not very sweet. So I'm wondering if that um might do the trick there.
only one way to find out.
I've been doing this thing during quarantine because I like haven't been going anywhere where I'd make corn cocktails, which is just like cocktails with whatever I have in my house. So it's definitely not like an accurate version of whatever the cocktail is, but it's just like out of desperation, like, oh, this is supposed to have grapefruit juice. Well, I have like grapefruit flavored sparkling water, so I'll use that.
Desperate times.
Yeah, so that might be a good one to try for a corn cocktail if I just use like the whatever random ginger beer and stuff that I have in my house. But maybe I'll also buy like actual real ingredients for that because it is a really good quality. That's the other thing is like most of the alcohol that I've been using for this is like old bottles of like pretty low quality stuff that we just like had in our cabinet because we drink beer mostly. Um, so I don't know if I really want to waste like really good quality rum on a cocktail that's, mediocre, but we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Like I said, the old fashioned or even a Sazerac
Yeah.
go really well with that. If you have vermouth, that would go well in sort of a rum Manhattan. Remember when you're making a cocktail, like a cocktail made really well, and I'm learning this more and more from my friends down here. Some just fantabulous. Now I'm making up words.
No, that's a
Fantastic.
word. I've used that word before. I think
Okay.
it's an
That
acceptable word.
was a trip up of the tongue there, but some fantastic mixologist. So learning that cocktails are supposed to highlight spirits. It's not to say they can't add and modify the flavor profile, obviously, but you don't want to bury a spirit in a cocktail like a bunch of fruit juices or something. So. Which are rum isn't the best for fruit juices anyway, but I would say those three would be really good for the
Okay,
market. So.
cool. Thanks for the advice. I will say, like, one of my favorite rum cocktails is a painkiller, and that has fruit juice in it. So I'm I'm on board with rum and fruit juice in certain
Yeah,
situations.
no, I love a painkiller. I mean, I like to say I've perfected the painkiller. Actually, Bahama Bob, who makes rum with me, used to be the bartender at the rum bar down here,
Oh,
and
cool.
that's where I met him. And he taught me how to make a painkiller, and it's actually far and away better than you can even get at Soggy on Yost.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's a bold claim. I'm gonna
well, because they're not batched. It's made one by one, so
Yeah, I guess that's
it's
true.
a it's a more balanced cocktail.
Well, that sounds delicious, and I will. Oh, he doesn't work there anymore though, so he wouldn't be able to
No,
make
no,
one
no.
for me. I made a Corin cocktail painkiller that was actually not bad considering I was making do, but definitely not as good as a real one for sure.
Yeah,
But it also was just with like Sailor Jerry's rum, so it wasn't like a huge waste of good rum or anything.
gotta have the pussers.
Yeah, I know. I almost honestly I almost ordered that when I did my order for the Pilar. But I was just like, okay, I probably don't need to spend I'll just start with the Pilar and then like maybe someday I'll get some of that too cuz I have had I mean like I've been to Pussers like when I, in the Caribbean and I've had theirs and stuff on location, I guess. So it was definitely nice. I think I had it in my head that like rums that are made far away or like seem special, I wouldn't be able to just like buy at Total Wine, which is like our, big alcohol
Right.
retailer here.
Yeah,
Because you
we
were
have, we have
like,
it here too.
can I order this online from Papa's? And you're like, yeah, or you could just like get it locally. And I was like, oh, why didn't I think of trying that
And we're
before?
100% in Total Wine. They're one of our big accounts.
Yeah. So So yes, anyone who wants to try this, I mean, you can order it online at the Papa's Pilar website as well. But if you want to just get it locally, it is at Total Wine. So I recommend, and I think I'll probably end up buying one of the regular and the white rum too, just so I can try them all.
So you could do a painkiller with our rum. There's actually a place down here that does one that does a painkiller with our dark.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to give that a shot once I get that ordered. Do you have a favorite rum? I mean, obviously, like straight rum is delicious, but like, do you have a favorite rum drink, like mixed drink or cocktail with rum?
Yeah, I would say my if I'm taking the Pilar hat off and not being that guy, because there's a lot of the Pilar cocktails I love, but my favorite for a long time. Actually, I'm a huge fan of the Cuba Libre, the rum and coke with lime. That's one of my favorites. I but I only use the bottled, the Coke made in Mexico without the artificial sweeteners in it.
Right. Yeah.
It does make a huge difference in the flavor of the cocktail. But there's one called a Tingray, and that's a Ray and Nephew, one of those Jamaican rums I mentioned before, and then Ting, which is a Jamaican grapefruit soda.
Hmm.
And Ting is 126 proof or something. It's 120 proof, something around that. I forget the exact proof on it, but it's super high alcohol. But 2 ounces of that topped off with about 8 ounces of the Ting soda is just fantastic. It's crisp, it's refreshing, and it packs a punch. So
That sounds delicious. Is there like you probably can't get that soda here. Is there like an equivalent?
I mean, I don't know. I find at Publix here, which is our
Oh,
supermarket.
I wonder
Um,
if we would have it.
you might, but any Jamaican style grapefruit soda, but it's got to have like a really heavy grapefruit note to it. Because I've used some before that when they were at a Tang. I don't know Churitos, I think.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of that.
I think I've used that before, and it's a close approximation.
All right. That's good recommendation too. This is so exciting. I'm just I'm gonna go drink a lot after this. It's kind of it was I mean, like I guess I could have started drinking. It's like 11 in the morning here, but figured probably after I do the podcast then I'll go start drinking my rum.
There you go.
Uh, I just want to talk a little bit more about because we started with the science part, and I just want to circle back to that for a minute. Um, so you're still doing stuff with that and doing the rum at the same time. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. I working for Pilar is my primary job, and that's what I do is sort of my main thing. I teach at the local college here. Right now, I'm teaching it's called basic research diving, which, as the name states, does involve diving, but it's not a diving class. So I teach people how to be underwater scientists,
Oh, cool.
how to do data collection underwater, how to look at the world through more of a scientific lens and things like that. So that's what I do as far as at the college. But I'm also working on, uh, trying to get a PhD project put together. So looking at different aspects of the sunscreen thing with the chemicals,
Oh,
and the interaction with the reefs and different points of transmission. So we've been working on that. That's actually what I've been doing this past week was doing a lot of water quality, water sampling and stuff around Key West. So trying to keep my toe in that world a little bit, and because I really enjoy doing that and teaching it to the kids. So
yeah. I think that's a sounds like a really interesting PhD project because it seems like especially like even within just the last few years the sunscreen um, reef thing has become much more I guess, general knowledge, and there's a lot more, like, reef-safe sunscreen options out there. I remember the last time I went to Hawaii, which was a couple years ago, they even like, on Hawaiian Airlines, on the flight over, they give you, like, a little fun like package of things, and one of the things was like, here's a little sample of reef safe sunscreen to use. And so I feel like that's a thing that's really starting to catch hold more generally. But I sometimes wonder, like, there's so many different ones now, and like, I'm just trusting them when they say it's reef safe, but like I don't really know. It's just like if it says reef safe on the bottle, then I'm like, okay, well, hopefully this is true. So
Yeah,
when I buy it,
you gotta kind of do your due diligence, right? So there's a thing called greenwashing, where companies will put things like
right,
reef safe, reef friendly, because there's no definition of that. There's no regulatory body that say it's not like the rainforest initiatives where you have to meet certain criteria to be able to put that label on your bottles or on your product. Anybody can put anything in a bottle and call it reef safe because there's no regulatory body for it. So, but what you're looking for are the oxybenzone, the octinoxate, the avabenzones, things like that. Really, what you want to make sure is you have, because when you look at ingredients, the first ingredients listed on something are the ones that it has the most of in the active ingredient section. So find stuff that is where the active ingredients are mineral based. So zinc, um,
okay,
like is the big one. Because it's not just bad for the reefs. I mean, it is terrible for the reefs. It does inhibit their ability to reproduce. But these chemicals have been shown to be toxic to humans as well because their body absorbs it. Whereas
right.
with
It's not good
the,
for you either.
no, it's really bad. I mean, it's linked to cancer. It's linked to problems with reproduction, all sorts of issues with the fetus with women that are pregnant. So it's a really big problem. But unfortunately, the personal care products industry fights tooth and nail to
Right.
defeat that. And they actually just, we had a sunscreen ordinance actually passed here in Key West, and then it got overturned at the state level because the personal care products industry lobbied the right people.
Oh,
So
that's terrible.
yeah, it's an ongoing battle, but we continue.
Yeah. I feel like the first battle was to like get people to wear sunscreen at all. It's like, well, you could get skin cancer, but then it's like if you wear a bunch of sunscreen that has like scary things in it, it's like, well, you could get other cancer
Yeah,
from that. So
it's not
you
good to
gotta,
consume and to cover ourselves in all of these just chemicals and everything. I mean, it's in our shampoos. It's not, these chemicals are just not in sunscreens either. Look at, if you once you start, it drives my wife crazy because I have the burden of knowledge, I guess, and I can't stop
yeah.
researching this stuff.
You're like, don't use that. Don't use that.
Yeah, we're a victim of our conveniences. Yeah, it's if you start looking into it, you're like, oh, this is bad, so I'm not going to use this sunscreen. Oh, this is also in my toothpaste and in my shampoo and in
Yeah.
this and
Yeah.
in that. So
Yeah, no, that's a good point because I feel like I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going somewhere that's reef, like if I'm swimming in the ocean, right? I'm like, okay, well, I definitely like want to make sure to use reef safe sunscreen. But if I'm just swimming in a pool or something, I'm like, well, I could use regular sunscreen for that. But like, I probably still should use not regular sunscreen for that because, like you said, the in- harmful ingredients to the reef are also not great for us as people. So
right, and you know what they're finding is they're finding measurable concentrations of these chemicals in human urine too. Because so if you go into a pool or a shower or something, you have this stuff on, it goes down the drain. Water treatment facilities aren't set up to get all of those chemicals out, so it ends up back in your drinking water, or some of that ends up out in the ocean. So
wow,
really the best way is just to avoid these things altogether. Down here in the Keys, a lot of people have started just wearing those long sleeve lightweight SPF
right.
kind of shirts, and that's the big thing down here.
Yeah, well, and I burn super easily, so I definitely like if I'm swimming or something, like I'm not in it to get a tan. I'm in it because like I want to go swimming. So
Yeah.
definitely not. I'm not worried about that. I'm not like, oh, I want to get like a nice tan or something. So definitely wearing protective gear or whatever. But like when I'm just swimming in the pool, I don't really think about that. If I was like out surfing or, I don't know, kayaking or doing something more like or like scuba diving, I usually wear like a rash guard kind of, but just swimming at home, I don't really never really thought about it that way before. But
Yeah.
this is all very educational. Thank you. I'm learning so many things on this podcast.
Of course. No, this is fun.
Well, I definitely, there's one more thing that we need to talk about before we go, and that is Jimmy Buffett, because this is generally a Jimmy Buffett inspired podcast. And I didn't even know, like, when I think, maybe they said this, I don't remember, but Ryan and Crystal, I remember specifically were like, oh yeah, like he does marine science and he makes rum. And I was like, great. But then when I talked to you, you were like, oh, also I like Jimmy Buffett. So perfect. So we got to talk about that a little bit. So do you tell me about your Jimmy Buffett fandom story? Like, have you been a Jimmy Buffett fan for a long time, or was it like you moved to Key West and then we're like, oh, well, I have to like Jimmy Buffett if I live in Key West, or like, how did it go?
Well, I mean, I've been a Jimmy fan for a long time. I, I've always, I grew up in Florida, so I grew up around his music, but it was just always sort of music that I knew as a kid growing up. The usual songs. You hear Margaritaville and Cheeseburger, and you hear all these songs that are his more popular, frequent,
Right.
anything from songs you know by heart. It's just I just knew they were songs. I didn't really know who he was growing up necessarily, but and then I was probably in middle school, and a good friend of mine, Mike Boggs, was a massive Buffett fan, and he and I used to take his boat out. I grew up near Tampa, in a little place called Newport Richey, on the Gulf Coast, and we would take his little boat out and we'd go fishing, and he would always play Jimmy. And so by doing that, that got me into, and it sort of piqued my interest. And so I was raised on country music and classic rock, so Jimmy sort of fit both of those molds. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I mean, since I was like 14, I think I've been a pretty big Buffett fan. I mean, he was his music, you know, for a long time, and still now, it played, a pretty integral part of my life. And just in a lot of ways, I'm not like I'm a parrot head, like as far as like being a Jimmy Buffett fan, but I'm even when I go to the shows, I don't put on feathers and coconut bras.
Right.
It's just not my thing. I'll put on a flowery shirt, but I might wear that on a day-to-day basis anyway. And even then, that's far and few between. But yeah, so I mean, we had Mike and I had a spot, like if we needed, it was sort of a code word, the Lone Palm.
Ugh,
We had if I said, hey, Lone Palm, like he knew what beach, down to the palm tree where we were meeting, so it was
that's cool.
interesting. And then, the Parrot Head Handbook was where I learned to make margaritas. So.
Oh, wow. That's pretty rad. Yeah, it's funny that you said that about being a big Jimmy Buffett fan, but not necessarily like getting into all of the um to do that goes along with the concerts and stuff. My friend Dan Smith, who has a podcast about Jimmy Buffett. He's classic_Buffett on Instagram if you want to check it out. He recently moved to Key West, and he is really into sort of like the old like Key West 70s Buffett. So that's like what the Instagram account is like cool old photos of Jimmy. And
Yeah.
um, but he and I were just talking about this recently, and he was saying like it's interesting how there's kind of like two groups of Jimmy Buffett fans. And not that you can't be part of both groups, because I would consider myself part of both groups, but there's sort of like the Jimmy Buffett fans that are like just really like Jimmy and maybe are like especially into like his whole catalog, like older stuff. And like just like the whole classic Jimmy Buffett thing. And then there's the group that's like, like hardcore parrot heads in the sense of like he described it as like weekend warriors, kind of like where you go to the concerts, you go all out, you do, you dress up with the whole thing. And neither of those are better than the other. It's just kind of there's like these two separate types of Jimmy Buffett fan. And like I said, like I kind of am both of those types, so it's not like they're not mutually exclusive. But yeah, I hadn't really ever thought about it sort of in those terms before, but it is kind of true that it's like not that you can't enjoy both sides, but some people are kind of just like, oh, I just really like Jimmy Buffett's music, but like I don't want to really put on a grass skirt and get drunk
I
before the concert or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Like
didn't
I'm
say anything
totally
about not getting drunk before the concert.
okay. Well, I guess like the pageantry part is what I mean.
Right. Yeah, no, I I love the concerts, and part of what I love about it is the tailgate and all the people and the, as you said, the pageantry, and I think it's amazing. The colors, and you feel like you're at Carnival in the islands a little bit,
Right.
and it's really interesting. It's just not my particular style. I think on one hand, I want to say that I don't fall into what I sort of like the escapism camp with all the flowers and everything, because I grew up in
Right.
Florida. I grew up on the beach. I grew
You
up.
didn't really need an escape. You
No,
were already
I grew up living the life that he sang about, which is what attracted me to him initially. I'm like, oh, this is like songs about what we do. Uh, but then I have plenty of friends that fall into the camp of all the flowery stuff, and I just think that it's a escape, from the day to day, as we all have
yeah.
our day to day lives, and it's just not necessarily my thing. It's interesting in Key West. There's I would say a large, I don't know, not an overwhelming group, but a large group of locals where parrot head is a dirty word. Uh, because you got to imagine living in Key West where you're just like Jimmy's everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
If you're a local musician, you got to play some Jimmy. It's just because it's what people want to hear, right? So,
Yeah.
and my wife
Yeah,
would be
that's
like, she's like,
amazing.
stop telling people you're a parrot head. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna. I am a parrot head. I love Jimmy for his music. I love his lyrics. That's what drew me to him initially. And I do love the older stuff. A1A and Living and Dying and all that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of neat to be able to walk around now, like in that same path. Like I was sitting at uh what's
Cavatoni's chart
I'm
room,
sorry, chart room.
Louis' backyard. I
My,
was
my,
listening
my
to the
brain
related
my,
Jimmy
my
Buffett.
brain just shut off for a second. I'm going, what the hell? I was
That happens to me a lot.
sitting at the chart room, and was talking to a bartender there who's been there for a long time, and the person who Jimmy wrote Pirate Looks at 40 used to be a bartender there, and they've got a picture of him up on the wall. And then I started thinking back to the what's the something in Lola. I forget the other person's name offhand. He's talking about 86 from the chart room. So it's kind of neat to be able to walk around, and even Nautical Wheelers, reading the story about how he came up with that down at the old the the Cuban embassy here is like that used to be a dance hall, and where he came up with the lyrics for that. So it's kind of neat, being a Buffett fan and of the lyrics, to walk around and go and to be able to look at all these things and
Yeah.
kind of put yourself in that moment, going to
Yeah,
Louis' backyard and things. So
I definitely like, the first time I went to Key West for Meeting of the Minds, um I definitely am there for the music, and I love, obviously I love Jimmy. So if people play Jimmy Buffett, that's fine. But also I love just the other musicians that have sort of spawned from Jimmy Buffett's music genre, I guess, sort of, they call it trop rock now, or
yeah,
uh and there's all these other musicians, so I love going and listening to just them play their own music too. But I definitely, so I try not to be super overtly touristy, but also I'm definitely like, oh, there's Captain Tony's, there's Chart Room, I'm definitely here's all the Jimmy Buffett related places. So I for sure geek out about that.
and that's fine. We're all tourists sometimes,
Yeah.
So I
Yeah, but
mean,
I could definitely understand how, if you live there, and especially if you don't really care that much about Jimmy Buffett, how that could get kind of old, of people just being like, Jimmy Buffett all the time.
yeah, but
Um
I find it really interesting. I like it. So especially when I take my dogs and go down to the little beach next to Louis, and I know specifically on Whitell which house that Jimmy used to live in. So it's like sometimes I'll park in front of it, and I'm like, So I've been here for
yeah.
7 years, and I still get a kick out of it. I'm like, that's funny.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that's kind of how my friend Dan just moved there recently. But yeah, he's kind of, doing that too. Now that he lives there, when he just goes places, it's like, oh, this is just a place Jimmy Buffett hang out, or this is, so that's pretty cool that it's still kind of exciting, even though you've lived there for so long. That's nice to hear that it's not, that you haven't become jaded about Jimmy Buffett just because you live in
Or
Key West.
or anything really. I mean, I grew up in Florida. Outside of I was in the Army for 4 years. Outside of that, I've lived only in Florida, and I try not to get jaded about anything. if I'm walking down the beach, I still have moments where I'm just like, gee, this is beautiful. It's like, like excited about being on a beach. And it's like, and I grew up since I was a child on a beach. So
Yeah.
I try
Yeah.
not to get jaded about things.
I feel like if I lived in Key West and I, scuba dived and I made rum, I don't think I would ever get jaded either. I would be like, this is the best all the
Yeah.
time. Do you have like, I know it's hard because there's like so many, but do you have a favorite dish album or a couple of songs that are your favorite?
Yeah, that is a really hard question.
I should have prepped you for I usually don't like write questions ahead of time, but I know it's hard because there's just like so much to choose from. But it doesn't have to be you don't have to be like
Off
this
the
is my
top of my
top
head,
top.
no, off the top of my head, oh, what's the actual title of that track? I was playing it earlier. I was fiddling with my guitar before I called you. Every now and then,
Oh yeah.
happily ever after.
Hmm.
I love the lyrics to that, very much.
Yeah.
And I'd say that's definitely one of my. And I just recently turned 40, so a pirate looks at 40. So
Oh,
that's a new
hit
meaning.
close to home. Yeah, I'm almost 35, but I feel like I'm definitely getting there. When I turn 40, I'll just be like, this is it.
Well, I didn't even
It's
it
happening.
never even occurred to me. I was sitting there one day just sort of strumming that song, waiting for my wife to get ready. So we're going out, and I was just kind of going through the chord progression. And it was a week or so after my birthday, and then I was kind of singing the song, and all of a sudden it like hit me. I'm like, oh God.
Oh no, this is actually applicable to my life now.
Yeah, that's kind of funny.
Have you read like any of Jimmy's books that he's written?
Yeah.
Because like Fire Looks at
Where's
50 is like his sort of like autobiography one.
No, I haven't read that one. I did
Oh
read A
really?
Salty Piece of Land. I
Okay,
read
yeah, that,
and I read Where is Joe Merchant?
uh-huh.
And there was one other one that was I think had Joe Merchant in it. I forget the title of the book.
Tales from Margaritaville.
Maybe I don't know. I mean, I read his books so long ago. Um, but
Yeah,
the
I just sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was going to say A Pirate Looks at 50 is one I've kind of meant to read. I just haven't gotten around to yet.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's by no means like I don't expect people who like Jimmy Buffett to automatically read his books, but for sure, like, if you're a Jimmy Buffett fan, The Pirate Looks at 50, because I mean, his other books are great too, but like they're more fictional, and Pirate Looks at 50 is like actually stories about his life. And it's just kind of a really fun read because he's a really good writer and you get an idea. I don't know, you just get to hear more story. He just like has led such an interesting life. So like as I feel like as many stories about his life as I can hear, I'm like happy to hear them. So
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend it if you need a book to read ever. Because it's if and if you're a fan of Jimmy Buffett, it's really well written and also just really interesting. So
Yeah, I really liked Joe Merchant in those books. So, I mean, I would definitely check it out.
yeah, cool. Well, it's been about an hour, and I usually don't always manage to stick to an hour, but uh, I'm sure that we could go on talking about. I'd be happy to hear more about all of these things forever, but I don't want to take up too much of your time today. So, uh, thank you so much for being on. Do you have like social media? Like, do you want people to follow you anywhere, or is it more just like, hey, go buy some rum? Like, what do you want to share with the people?
I mean, yeah, definitely check out Papa's Pilar. You can get it online, shop papaspilarrum.com. I don't have like a social media following. I don't really do social media too much. Uh, but
That's totally
definitely check out
fine.
the rum when you're down in Key West. Come to the distillery, check us out. Make sure when you do come to the Keys, you're uh, looking up the what's eco-friendly as far as sunscreens and things like that, and try to have as
Right. Yeah.
small as an impact on our fragile little environment that we all rely on so much as possible.
Yeah, I haven't been scuba diving there yet, but I really like to scuba dive. So I feel like the only times I've been to Key West are for meeting of the minds, and it's so busy. Like like meeting of the minds is like a really specific thing, and it's basically like to watch music. So you're like at all these places for music all the time. So
Hmm.
I actually haven't, like, sometime I would like to go on just a vacation where I could do other things too.
Right, right.
Like go scuba diving or like go see more like of the parks and like historic things. Because it's kind of just like go to see all these different musicians and bands in different places during Meeting the Minds. So I would love to come down and I really like to scuba dive. So I'd like to do that down there sometime. But I definitely will be thinking a lot more about the sunscreen and different products thing now after our conversation. So I hope other people will too, and I hope that people learned a lot because I feel like I learned a lot on this podcast.
Well, that's good.
So thanks. Thanks. Yeah, thanks so much for being on. And yeah, like I said, next time I'm down there, I definitely would love to take a tour of the distillery. So hopefully that can happen someday in the future. And if you ever want to come back on again and talk about Jimmy Buffett and rum for another hour, I'd be totally game for that.
Yeah, sounds good. We can do that. And if whenever you're coming down to Key West, just reach out to me, let me know, show you around the distillery. Maybe we'd actually get out on the water and do some diving.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, thanks for being on. I really appreciate it. And thanks again to Ryan and Crystal for making this connection because it was really great to chat with you.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks very much. And thanks, Ryan and Crystal.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. If you have any other guests you want to send my way, feel free. All right. Have an awesome rest of your day.
You as well.
Okay, so welcome back from that interview with Shawn Martin. Thanks again to Shawn for being on. I had such a good time. Like I said, I learned a ton, and hopefully next time I'm down there, whenever that is, I will get to visit the distillery because I would really like to see all of that description in action. Like he said, it's kind of hard to describe some of it without visuals, but I would love to see it all happening, how the magic happens, if you will. Um, and I just want to reiterate that uh, when I talked about the whiskey rum, the rum is not bad. It's really good rum, you guys. So please, I bought some because I wanted to be able to recommend it to people. And they didn't pay, like they didn't send me rum or anything. Like I bought it with my own money. So um, I'm giving you my honest opinion. And even though it tastes like whiskey, which is not my favorite, and like he said, it's like really, really sort of like a mild whiskey taste, but I just am really sensitive. It's still good, and I'm still going to drink it. So please do not let my aversion to whiskey um, discourage you from getting it. It's really delicious. And there's also, like we said, there's just the regular dark rum. There's the white rum also available. All three of those are available at Total Wine. So you can order them there. I got it through Instacart, so I didn't even have to go to Total Wine. They just delivered it to my house, which was awesome. So please check that out if you're into rum. Like I said, they're not paying me to say this. I just really like rum. And Shawn was nice and he makes delicious rum. So if you are into rum, I encourage you to check out their brand. And also just check out the distillery when you're down there because it sounds really cool to be able to go and see everything. The gift shop and all that they have. And you can buy all their stuff online too. So like you can actually buy the rum from their website. And, you can buy merch and stuff from their website. I just bought it from Total Wine because I wanted to get it in time for the podcast to be able to have some before the podcast. And I wasn't sure if I ordered it from the website, if it would come in time. So, but you can also just order it directly from their website. So go check it out. And thanks again so much to Shawn for being on. Was really cool. Like I said, that's kind of a combination of things that I would like my life to be. The job that I really, really wanted to do was I wanted to be an underwater archaeologist. That didn't really work out because I was an art major in in undergrad, and then I couldn't like get into any graduate programs without any science classes to be like anything science related. And then I just went to library school This is my life story, basically. So basically, I ended up doing something different. But in dreamland, I would be an underwater archaeologist as my job. So I feel like underwater, like marine scientist doing research underwater is like pretty close to that. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed that interview. I had a great time. Thanks again so much for listening to Blame It on Buffett. I'm really enjoying doing this, and I hope you all are enjoying listening. I love hearing your feedback, so please, um, if you are liking it, please let me know. You can once again email me at blameItonBuffettPodcast@gmail.com or follow me on social media at BlameBuffettPod on Twitter, Instagram, and you can do that on Facebook, or you can just search Blame It on Buffett Podcast on Facebook. That should bring it up too. Yeah, and if you have any thoughts on the podcast, if you're liking it, if there's things you'd like me to talk about, really anything, feel free to message me, and I'd be happy to hear your thoughts. And if you're listening on a platform that does ratings like Apple Podcasts, please, if you like it, give it a rating, give it a star rating, leave a comment. You don't have to leave a comment to just hit the star rating button. So, and that helps a lot too. But if you want to leave a comment, that's also awesome. I really appreciate that. And also I have a YouTube channel now where you can find the podcasts. They usually go up a little later in the week than the actual podcast goes up on everything else, but eventually you can find them there. And then any other videos that I'll be making, which right now is mostly Corn Cocktails videos. But I was thinking about maybe starting to do either like Trop Rock merch reviews or like product reviews from companies that donate some of their proceeds to like environmental, like ocean charity things, which is like I mentioned in this episode, close to my heart. So yeah, if you would be interested in seeing any of those on YouTube, please let me know. And also, if you have a YouTube account, just go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find it if you search Blame It on Buffett podcast, I believe. So yeah, that would mean a lot. And the more subscribers I get, if I get enough subscribers, I can change the URL to not just be like a bunch of gibberish. Like right now it's like YouTube/XY932. But like once you get to a certain amount of subscribers, I could change it to like YouTube/Blame It on Buffett, which would be awesome. So yeah, please do that if you feel so inclined. And let's see, is there anything else I think that's pretty much it. Just once again, thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate all of you. And until next time, if anything's going to happen, it's going to happen out there.
Blame it on Buffett. He was my hero from way in the past, and I sang his songs and had island dreams before I ever read the main up a mask. Blame it on Buffett. We took the road less traveled upon, and though he beat me there, well, I'm enjoying